To my panelists, I'm going to get this started. Each one of us brings a different perspective on what consumerization of health means. In your own words, how would you describe the work your organization does in this context? We'll start with you, Divya, followed by Greg, and then Keith.
All right. So hi, everybody. Thanks for having me here. And this is a great topic, very close to my heart. And I'm representing Samsung, though I am currently working for Samsung Strategy and Innovation Center. And we do a lot of, we look at the entire spectrum of digital health in terms of investments, M&A, incubating new ideas, etc. And when I joined Samsung, it was mind-boggling to think about Samsung as a whole. It's a conglomerate of multiple billion-dollar business units, and I was just familiar with the phones and the appliances, the fridges and the TVs in your home. Samsung does construction, and Samsung has medical centers, builds ultrasound and MRI machines, and it has a pharmaceutical arm as well. And it was very interesting to think of digital health from a Samsung corporate company perspective. We are the leading consumer electronics brand in the world. So the number of lives and the minutes we have of consumers' attention is mind-boggling. So when we think about, there are many physicians, providers, payers in the audience, and you think about how are you engaging with patients and how much impact do your services have on consumers, we are able to influence them the most, right? Yet Samsung was not thinking about digital health until very recently, and we've started the endeavor. And I think consumerization of health is, for me, companies like Samsung, consumer companies with reach, with access, with engagement, touch points, trying to influence our behaviors and motivating us to lead healthier lives. And if that can happen, I think that can truly change the conversation here. So that is consumerization of health from my perspective.
Thank you, everybody. I'm really delighted to be here speaking with you all today. So my background is really in artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I've been working on the applications of these technologies to products and services for a while now at Google. And a few years ago, we realized that I feel that the greatest single opportunity to leverage these technologies to improve the human condition is to apply them in healthcare. And that's because I share this position that we already heard in the session that fundamentally in healthcare we have a supply and demand issue. And that there's insufficient supply in order to meet healthcare demand in a timely fashion. And often health problems expand beyond where we could optimally deal with them because we're late and we're understaffed. And I believe that artificial intelligence as a series of technologies really has the opportunity to expand the abilities of providers at every level, whether those are specialists, generalists, nurse practitioners, or even you yourself. And I'm really excited, and I believe that companies, big tech companies and small new startups, really have a role to play here in trying to expand the technical abilities of everyone to be able to provide healthcare in a more timely, accurate, and available fashion that it's been done. And I believe that's the only way that we can really meet the triple aims of expanding accuracy, availability, and reducing costs within healthcare.
Keith? What's left to say? Good afternoon, everybody. I think these two answers are just awesome answers as you think about what's happening in healthcare. So we want to see care move and expand from just the hospital all the way to the home. And thanks to Divya and Samsung, we're going to see that grounds up swell so that we can see that kind of continuity of the individual's care, regardless of whether or not there's an active caretaker other than a family member, for example, in the picture. Google gave us TensorFlow. Every algorithm that GE Healthcare is putting into our tens of thousands of devices that we ship every year, thank you. Yes. We're using TensorFlow as that foundational element. So when you think of how do we try and bridge this, coming back to Greg's comment, we see one of the biggest issues is access to care. And so you can absolutely say, hey, let's give more power and autonomy to the citizen, the patient in the home. But how do we actually de-skill what's required to receive great care? So these algorithms that we're building with TensorFlow and delivering via SageMaker on AWS into our devices, all of this is about how do we reduce the barrier to capturing an incredible scan? So if we can automate more and more, well then in the case of ultrasound, for example, we're trying to borrow from some of the very same gaming capabilities of let's drive the probe for maternal care, for example, to give an algorithm to tell us where to put that probe to get the best picture of the baby's brain. And then let's automatically understand the volume of that brain so that we can see where that baby is in their development cycle. Do they have congenital diseases? All of this we're automating thanks to you. And so you can see that we're all part of this bridge trying to improve care. Our part is to create incredible devices where what used to be a specialist, as Greg said, could now more be for women's health and maternal care, perhaps a midwife or a nurse that's performing that same scan, so that we can reach out to more and more of our population and give them great care.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating, Keith, that it feels like data and analytics is the common thread that binds all of us. And each of our organizations is using it to drive better health outcomes. That said, it feels like each of us holds the key to a portion of the consumer's data. And I'm wondering if your organization sees that as a challenge, and how you overcome that challenge of creating a holistic view of a consumer, knowing that it's kind of scattered, it's distributed across multiple different domains. So I'll start with you, Keith, and we'll follow it up with Divya and then Greg.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, data is a real challenge. So for somebody like GE, we operate in 160 countries. And as I'm sure Greg can teach you better than I, and all of you in the room can teach you better than me, for an algorithm to perform brilliantly, we actually need the lives of those 160 countries. We need our algorithm to be trained on the very data where it's going to be inferenced. And so data is indeed a huge challenge for us, and it varies in different places in the world. So today, for example, in the US, it's not all that hard to get data and to partner with great hospitals to create these algorithms.
Like Kaiser.
Like Kaiser, absolutely. At the same time, the laws are changing in part because of consumerization. We see GDPR, for example, which has incredibly great intentions, but maybe some unintended consequences. It will be incredibly hard for us to receive data in broad swath across Europe, and soon potentially in India, with the laws that are changing right now, if we need to be able to revoke that data back out of the algorithms that we create, for example. So completely agree that data is a huge challenge, because the technology is so much better than it was in 2015 for us to scale algorithm development. But right now we need that great ground truth data. And so all of you as startups that are in the room, I think Rajiv's comment was so superb, and I think it's going to be a very common theme that you hear today, is that every company is becoming a software platform company. I lead up a group called Edison, which is a platform for bringing intelligence into our devices and software. We need tens of thousands of healthcare algorithms. GE's not going to do that alone. We're going to do that with great startups. Catch your algorithms in a great Docker container, for example, and deploy them into the ecosystem of Kaiser, for example. And so this is one of the ways we overcome this barrier of data, is we partner with everyone so that we can harness and achieve the long tail of health that we need to with everybody who wants to contribute.
So yeah, I think when you think about consumerization, you think about consumer apps, we always say, I come from a design background, we say less is more, keep the design simple, keep it easy to use, all of that. But when it comes to data, more is more. The more we understand about our consumers, the better quality of care we can provide. And I'd like to use the term consumers, not patients, because it health spans across the spectrum. So we've been thinking about this problem a lot. When we go to the clinician's office, see your doctor, they have data, intermittent data during your clinical visits, right? A lot of life happens outside of clinical visits. Are you stressed? What does your heart rate say about you? Are you working out? Are you eating right? Do you sleep enough? And is your health being compromised because of all of these other factors? How is the air quality, etc.? And we are trying to, and because Samsung has the advantage of reaching people's lives outside of clinical settings, we are trying to understand the whole, and we're trying to understand the more, not less, around a patient's life. And I think that is what has been missing in clinical practice, is understanding the context of providing care. And that is a challenge with data. Now, when you think about data, quality of data matters, what kind of data matters, and consumer electronics companies have been capturing low quality consumer grade data. We are trying to change that. We are trying to build more accurate sensors that will capture accurately your clinical signals, be it ECG, be it heart rate, respiratory rate, detect sleep apnea, but all clinical grade. So there is a shift. I think there is an increased focus on data, but also increased focus around the quality and the type of data you're collecting, and being mindful of what use cases you're trying to solve, and then going deliberately after high quality data, taking it through clinical trials and regulatory and all of that, and making it more meaningful so that we can have true impact.
Makes sense.
So from the machine learning point of view, one of the things that's really important to understand is it's not just about volume of data. It's about the relevance of data to your specific and crisply defined objective. And so, for example, when we wanted to work on preventative screening for diabetic retinopathy, no data that Google holds is of any use in that task, right? And we had to partner with hospital systems in India in order to get historical scans that we could train AI systems on in order to allow them to scale their screening systems well. We were able to show that with those data, yes, in fact, we could build machine learning algorithms that performed at least as well as the human screeners did. And now we're in trial deployments there, where we're actually realizing this transformation of scaling care in a way that would have been previously impossible without these technologies. So when you think about data, it's important to not just go for, well, there's a big pile of something and we imagine that we're going to mine something, but I prefer to instead start with the specific product and market objective, and then say, what are the right data that I really need in order to build a system that delivers the services that are required?
Yeah, it's quite fascinating. For Kaiser Permanente, we are integrated healthcare providers, so we have a ton of data about you. And even with that, we have about 10% of data that we have about you. So 90% of the data is outside of the clinical care setting. So as we get to our last question, please start thinking about questions you have for the panelists. And my last question is really to you, Greg, followed by Keith and Divya. How do you see consumerization of healthcare evolving in the coming years, and what guidance do you have for organizations that are looking to venture in this space?
Yeah, so I believe that the rate of innovation that we're used to in technology and the rate of innovation that we're used to in healthcare are pretty mismatched. And there's this problem in how we do the innovation, that this impedance mismatch can just have things bounce off one system rather than really transmit and change what's going on. And I think that as technologists, we're going to have to realize that we need to work well with the healthcare system and match our ability to deliver innovations to the to the standards of rigor and the timescales of change that are realistic in those markets. We're not going to flip a switch and turn things on suddenly, but instead I think that it needs to be a concerted effort that unfolds over a decade or two.
Keith?
Shorter. Shorter, I hope.
Shorter would be nice. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think Greg hit on something that we're really trying to master as well, which is how do we bring artificial intelligence into healthcare, but make that adoption nearly invisible. So I gave the example of women's health ultrasound and guide the probe, get the perfect image, interpret the image. When we think about this incredible amount of anatomy that we have and all the physics from ultrasound to x-ray to MR to mammo, every single one of the device types that we have in the market today, as I said earlier, it's a massively long tail, but our vision for this Edison platform that we're creating is make it easy to catch algorithms and then insert them into the device workflow, into the medical workflow. So to Greg's point, how do we reduce that impedance mismatch? We think part of it is actually putting it in the background so that it's not in your face, that it's not some new screen, but it's part of the natural work that you already do. So that's our real vision, is partnering with the community, both academic as well as clinical, as well as startups, to drive that innovation and help us inject your brilliance into our devices.
So I think it's the same point. I want to reinforce what Greg and Keith have been saying. It's partnerships, and partnerships. I think in health industry, as we from a consumer electronics company point of view, grapple with the anonymity and the complexity of the systems, payers, providers, pharma, patients, all of this, I think it is not, innovation and technology advancement cannot happen in silos. I think you do need to be embedded within the clinical workflows, try to solve the real world use cases that are required, and that as entrepreneurs, as startups, you can move fast, you can build quick solutions, but you do need the partnerships of heavyweights like a Kaiser or an Anthem to bring your innovation to market. And so partnerships is interesting. And most of these big companies, Samsung included, Google, even pharma and payer provider networks do have their innovation programs now. They are looking at startup coming in and pitching to them. So that's a great channel to get your technology in front of these big companies. That would be my...
Okay,
Yeah.
great. I just got the cue that we don't have time for questions. Could we take one? Yeah, sure. One question? Yes?
Nice panel and very good insights.
Super panel.
Absolutely. Why is it that the healthcare industry, topic is consumerization, but what's happening is it's becoming more and more elusive and elitist to have good health benefits. Why is it that the healthcare industry is not able to be on the Moore's law trajectory of being able to provide better benefit at 2x the rate every year for half the price? Where are we going wrong with the healthcare industry?
Yeah, I'll give you my perspective, and I'd welcome the panelists to chime in as well. I think a big part of it is regulation and being able to share data across entities in a manner where you can ensure that the data is not going to fall into the wrong hands. That, at least from a Kaiser perspective, that has been our biggest challenge, the ability and the ease with which you can share data and innovate, which will then drive that innovation and drive down cost over a period of time. Anyone else? Thoughts?
I have the same question. Why is healthcare industry so difficult?
Hi, Keith, this is directed at you. GE came out with this nice portable ultrasound machines. And typically, going further, we're talking about democratizing data, taking it out there. I do understand, however, there are challenges around scaling this portable ultrasounds. Why do you think, when somebody comes up with a more portable device, what challenges are you guys facing and why? How are you intending to solve this, and why is this not sort of scaling out there as what would have been an imminent success?
Right. Wow. I think this is actually the sister question to the prior question. I think that the history of healthcare devices, you could almost map it to like digital cameras. We were so focused on megapixels, on the resolution and image quality that we went after. There's a brilliant article, and I'm sorry to keep saying such nice things about Google, but there's a brilliant article about the AI in the Pixel 3 and making the phone not just a software-defined device for the apps that are on it, but for the hardware that is on it. This is where we're going to do that disruption in cost. So your prior question, not yours, but the prior question of how do we bring down cost is by making these devices more software-defined. How do we do that? Well, all we have to do is create it so that it's easy to catch this IP and inject it into the device, just as the phone companies have done for the last decade. And I think that same marketplace, that same concept of choice is going to come to us in healthcare.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up to the super panelists, Greg, Pete, and Divya. Thank you.
Thanks.